That's what it means. Love your neighbor as yourself, because your neighbor is part of your family. And it fits into Jesus' teachings around the image of the church as the body of Christ. You know, the hand can't say it doesn't need the foot can't say it doesn't need the eye can't say it doesn't need the ear, because they're all one unit. And so the hand has to be as cautious and careful for the foot as the foot has to be for the eye and the eye for the ear. And so when we're commanded to love one another, we're commanded to love one another because we are one unit in God, one family in God. And this morning we are going to pledge our support and our prayers and our witness to two new human beings who are members of the human family and the members now, after today, of the Christian family as well. And we're going to pledge to them not because they're cute and not because they're helpless, but because they are part of our family, because they are part of a community that does not allow us to separate ourselves from one another or push one another away. So we're inviting them into a kind of community that behaves very differently from the world in which they will grow up. The world's a very different place. I wrote a sermon, and I went back and found it actually in my files the other day. I wrote a sermon in 1979. And in that, I called it "The World as a Postage Stamp." And I talked in those days about the fact that everybody wants to be so me, that we build up nice little walls around ourselves, little picket fences sometimes. And before you know it, we want what's inside our picket fence to belong to us, and everybody else should just keep their hands off what we've got. And I said, you know, if that continued, I was naive in those days, but if we continued that way, before you know it, the entire world would be nothing but countries the size of postage stamps, with maybe one person in each country. Because we would be so divided. That's the tendency of the world today. I mean, if you look at what's happening, that group wants their own country, that group wants their own country, and there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is that we tend to build up walls and barriers between those peoples and those countries, and strangely enough, we even build walls between different branches of the Christian church, when we're all supposed to be looking at each other as part of one family, one community, and treating one another as valuable and important members of that one community. So as we gather this morning, those are the kinds of pledges we make. We're going to live a different kind of life for Jocelyn and Ella. We're going to witness to a different way of behaving for Jocelyn and Ella. We're going to witness to a different kind of vision for the world to these two young people. And that means that we have to take seriously some of our own promises. I said to the baptismal preparation yesterday, I said, you know, how many parents don't like it when their children lie to them? How many of you who are parents out here don't like it when your children lie to you? Now, I have to ask you a question. Did you have your children baptized? When you had your children baptized, did you make promises to them? Have you kept the promises? And if you didn't, do not condemn your children when they lie to you, because you set the example. That's what happens in the world. Oh, well, it's just not convenient for me to keep the promise that I said. Well, maybe it's not convenient for one group of people to care for the other group of people. It's just not convenient. So let's let the other group of people starve to death, or die, or just wander the world. When we don't care enough to be honest and truthful with our children, how can we ever be expected to be honest and truthful with one another? If we set the standard in solemn moments like this of promising to do certain things for our children and then never do it, how can we expect anything from our children if they follow our example? That's the real question that we have to ask. It's a question of integrity, parents, and people who are going to bear witness to the life that we lead as Christians. That's the first thing I said yesterday. Well, not the first thing, one of the things I said. But the other thing I said was that these promises that we make are ones that are very important for the upbringing of these children. Because these children are going to go out into the world. Now let's say that they went to a school in this neighborhood. I know that they're not probably going to, but let's say they went to a school in this neighborhood. And I can tell you that a school in this neighborhood will teach them about several world religions. It will also teach them about sex, drugs, alcohol, rock and roll. It will teach them all those things. And there's lots of people who say, well, I'm going to wait until my kid grows up to give them the chance to make their own decision. So I'm not going to teach them anything about the church. They're going to learn about sex, drugs, alcohol, politics, anger, race relations, all sorts of things. They're going to learn about other religions. But never having been taught anything about Christianity will mean that they can't make their own fair choice because they don't have all the information they need to do so. How many of you would like to go to the bank and have the banker prepare your loan, but not tell you what the fine print is, not give you all the information, not tell you what the interest rate is going to be? Would you think that that was fair for you to sign that document if you had not been given all the information, to make a decision to take that loan when you hadn't been told what the interest rate would be? No, it wouldn't be fair. It's also not fair for us to allow our children the freedom to make their own decision if we do not give them all the information. So moms and dads and sponsors today, teach Ella and Jocelyn the Christian faith, but also teach them what the teachings of Islam and Hinduism and Judaism are. Because we need to stand with respect for those who have faiths different than ours. And only then will we have given our children all the information they need to choose for themselves. My hope is that in the long run they will come as adults to accept this Christian faith for themselves because it has been witnessed to them and because they have seen that for them it is their best choice. The other thing that I think that we really need to look at is what kind of witness do we make? And the other thing that we have to think about is that I always say that Christians live by Jesus' big but. Jesus' big but is that simple statement. You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, love your enemies, do good to them that hate you, etc., etc. We have to live a life that's different. It's not just good for us to be here in this place and say nice things and commit ourselves to good works and then never do them. It's not just good for us to be here one part of the day or one part of the week or one part of the year and then go out into the world and behave exactly as the world behaves. How many of you think the world is just fine the way it is? Anybody here think the world's just fine the way it is? How many of you would like to change the world? Well, a couple of people want to change the world. How many of you would like to just change the world immediately around you? Good. I'm glad somebody does. We're never going to be able to do that if we behave exactly like the rest of the world. If the world's out there slashing at one another out of racial anger or religious anger or political anger, we can't even have a peaceful, quiet, and logical election campaign in this country without nasty words. If we continue to allow the world to behave like that, Ella and Jocelyn will grow up into a world that will be behaving like that. But if we live different lives, if we insist that in our families and in our communities and in our organizations that we belong to, and if we influence in our political and social systems the world around us, if we say that no, anger and hatred are not good reasons for making decisions, if we say that treating people with less respect than they deserve is not a good way for people to live, unless we say that things need to change and then change them in our own lives, The world will never be any different than it is, and may in fact get worse. Boy, we're going to be promising a lot today. We're going to be promising a lot today. But I said to the parents, I said, and to the sponsors, I said, don't think that you have to be perfect at doing all that as soon as you promise to do it. The only thing, and it's really interesting, the words that are used, you'll hear them shortly in the baptismal rite. It says, will you strive? Not just a feeble attempt, but will you strive to do these things? Will you persevere even when it's tough going? Will you stick to it? A lot of the time, people, especially Christians, get to the point where, well, I just can't do anything about the evil in the world. I'll just sit back and let everybody else do it. That's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to persevere. We're supposed to stick to it. To strive, to persevere, to continue in witness, and to be faithful in what we've promised. That doesn't say that we're absolutely going to do it. It recognizes that we're going to fall short. It recognizes that we're going to have difficulties accomplishing it. And when we have those difficulties, that's what this community is for. That's what the Christian church is for. It's a place where people help each other along the way. When we're having difficulties meeting our promises, there are others who can help. When we get a little off track, there are others who can help us get back on track. And that's the joy of being part of a community. It's the gift that comes to Jocelyn and Ella today as they enter into a community of mutual companionship on the journey of life. So as we pray for these two today, let us also pray for ourselves, that we may seriously take our promises, that we may live them out to the best of our ability, that the world may change because of us, and may that be a gift to Jocelyn and Ella as they grow and mature in their lives. Amen.